I was very frustrated about the lack of knowledge and discussion around sexuality and disability, and it didn't make sense to me because disability is something that affects anybody and everybody.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 59 of the Strokecast. Each year, I spend a week on the JoCo Cruise. I talked about it last year in episode 4, and this year, well, it was really just as amazing. This year, I also had the pleasure of meeting Robin Wilson-Beattie on the boat. She's a speaker, writer, and educator working at the intersection of disability and sexuality. We sat down in the ship's art gallery to talk about these issues and how they impact stroke survivors and other folks with disabilities. We actually met up on cosplay day on the boat, which is always a lot of fun. And that also explains why Robin was in her full Wakandan warrior regalia. Well, that probably explains it. Anyway, we had a great chat on the show and almost missed dinner as a result. This episode is a great chance to meet Robin. We'll have to invite Robin back for a more in-depth discussion in the coming weeks or months. The other thing to note about this episode is that it does include discussions about sex. So, as they say, listener discretion is advised. Robin came into the world able-bodied, but had a birth defect that resulted in a spinal aneurysm. After scheduling surgery to fix the aneurysm, she learned she was pregnant. And during the surgery, she acquired a spinal cord injury that resulted in partial paralysis. She continues to cover while living in San Francisco and helping folks with disabilities navigate the world of sex. So now, let's meet Robin.
I also happen to be pregnant at the same time. So reproductive health and disability, I got a crash course in it. And so I realized that was an intersection. But then also working in professional developmental disability in that world as a self and systems advocate coordinator.
What does that mean?
Okay, teaching people, and I taught young people with disabilities, self-advocacy skills about how to speak up for what you need, how to speak, and when I'm talking about systems, we're talking about like education, we're talking transportation, employment, health. Those are all, extraordinarily important systems. But the youth were coming to me, and, because we were forming a group, to an advocacy group, and it was to be youth directed. And they were like, this is all really cool, but, I want to know, like, how do I ask somebody out on a date? Or how do I know that, how to kiss somebody? I've never kissed anybody. Or, these, and especially, these, it turned out that even though sexuality is supposed to be a component, in transitional programs, in special education, in school systems, in special education, you're supposed to have this sexuality component, but often, they do not. Because for mainstream children as well, they don't get that kind of, a lot of states do not have that kind of comprehensive sexuality education for youth. So, I was getting a lot of those questions. And when I say youth, I was working with individuals who were 17 through 28. I'm not talking about babies. But, so, they're asking me these questions. And and I understood because I was in a very conservative area. My boss was apoplectic that I was discussing sexuality. So I just grassroots started talking about disability and sexuality, and that because I saw that there was a need for it. I did not see. I was looking up for myself. After having acquired, my injury and, recovery and going through rehab and, and being a mom and then, going back into the work world and, my life changed, dramatically from how I was, before. And I like the direction, but I was very frustrated about the lack of knowledge and discussion around sexuality and disability. And it didn't make sense to me because disability is something that affects anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter, right. And so finding someone. So I started grassroots speaking at got to speak in Emory medical schools, talking to first-year medical students about taking the sexual history of somebody with a disability, but more talking around issues of cultural competency and realizing that, when you meet a patient with a disability, you meet a patient with a disability. Don't make these heteronormative assumptions around what this person, how they express their sexuality, how they express their gender, do not, and so those sorts of things. Because I've talked to, there are so many assumptions that are made about people with disabilities and what they are actually interested in or able to do sexuality-wise or reproductive health-wise. Some, and we're talking about, birth control, all sorts of things like that. Issues that, physicians and things need to think of. I saw that, so like I said, started talking grassroots. I got to speak, actually, Karis Bookstore and More. It's a feminist bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia. Was the first place that I heard of in town that was just doing this whole participatory type educational series around disability and different things. And I was on a panel there that when they were talking about sexuality. And I was on a panel with a Black man who identified as male and who identified as heterosexual, and he was blind, and because he got glaucoma very, very young. And then there was another gay man identified, him, and who was very queer, and he was deaf. They had me, and at that particular time, before I'd started working, suburban mom, and we were all talking about, our sex lives, just having this discussion. It was a moderated discussion, but about different issues and things like that, and awareness. But the fact that, that was the first time I realized, oh yeah, this is something that affects everybody. That I'm certainly not alone, even though I'm frustrated. I'm not alone, and it's just that we just don't talk about it enough. Anyway, but from there, I decided to start. I went to a sexuality conference in DC as a volunteer. I knew I wanted to do that, and then, but from there, and also, but community, I found my best friend, Bethany Stevens. She right now is currently getting her PhD. I'm so proud of her.
Oh, awesome.
But the thing is, though, because she should have a PhD, she already teaches. She's teaching now, right now, and she teaches on the intersection of disability, sexuality. But she's a disability scholar, and if you look up any of her stuff, Bethany Stevens, and she has written a lot. But she also knows a lot about and gets asked about transability, people who make themselves disabled because that's how they identify and how they feel.
Right. That's a whole interesting area
that's
in and of itself.
Yes. Yes. Finding her, we met at an ADAPT march. ADAPT is a grassroots, civil disability rights group. And I mean, because of that group, that's why Greyhound buses are accessible. That's why, certain things like IEPs, healthcare, ADAPT, and people would be really, without ADAPT, people just, getting together like that and activating like that, it's actually had a really big impact, but in ripple effect ways that I don't think people realize. We met at one of those actions in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
So where we were protesting about Medicaid and housing, and things like that. And so finding that disability community was extremely important because that's where I learned about issues as well. And Bethany was the first person that I saw that had a disability, who was just out there talking about sex and putting that scientific spin on it and showing all the research, but just asking those questions. And she's amazing. And that's my best friend. She showed me the world. Then the American Association of Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, ASECT, I learned that that's an actual, I learned that, okay, this is a field and a discipline, but of course, because, it is part of who we are. We are humans. It's just part of our nature. And of course, due to cultural reasons, all across the world, we have different attitudes and ways we approach and treat, sexuality.
Right. And I think most people, when they look at the folks with disabilities, they think, okay, that person is disabled or has disabilities, and okay, that's what I need to know, and they move on from there. They, forget that folks who are working with disabilities are, first of all, folks. They're people all of the other needs and desires of folks without disabilities.
But yeah, finding that community was very important. Finding that connection, because from there, learning about learning that it's a discipline, learning about the science, and learning about the research, and learning about how to apply these things and actual things to actually help people live their lives. But I did realize, like you said, attitudes, and you were talking about how people view or how do they see, but it's also having to, also just defining what you think about what is disability. Because there are all these different, there's like the medical model and there's the social model of disability. And the medical model, a lot of times, it focuses on your ability, how you can or can't physically. It sits there and, looks at it in pure, like scientific ways of, okay, this is not working the way it does in a typical person. Therefore, this is what a disability is. However, there are other disabilities too that people, when they think of terms and disability, a lot of times they're thinking, something that they can see physically,
right,
or something. There are a lot of hidden disabilities that people have, that need accommodations.
And I think that's something that is very common in the stroke community. I mean,
yes.
A lot of folks, in some ways, a lot of us talk about how we're lucky because of our particular flavors. It's obvious when folks see me walking with my cane or my limp and not using my arm that I have a disability. Yeah. Other folks in the community who may have full control over their limbs may have cognitive challenges regarding attention, memory, language, and people don't see that. And they're like, you don't look so bad.
Yeah, that whole but you don't look sick. Yeah, and it's just like, or people not understanding that, you may see people who appear able-bodied who are using this disability space. You have no idea what they're going through.
Exactly.
Or what's going on internally. So, it's that whole, but yeah, there are, all sorts of different, things like that. And so, but it's also learning how people identify and that self-identify that way. And if they feel like they're part of that community, so.
Yeah. It looks great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Just wanted to say.
Thank you.
Awesome. And folks keep coming by to say how awesome you look in your full Wakandan regalia here.
Yes, Wakanda forever.
Awesome. So what does your day-to-day job look like then in this space?
Well, okay, so now that, like I said, in 2013 is when I actually started to be like, okay, I want to be a professional educator. And so that's when I started getting education. So I and decided to make a cross-country move. And I moved from Atlanta to San Francisco. So I live there now. And what it looks like now for me is I might be working on writing and editing an article, like under a lot of pressure, but that's okay. I work best under pressure. Also, speaking. I have been speaking at universities, speaking podcasts, speaking conferences. I am keynoting this year at 3 really big conferences. I am keynoting at ASECT this year at the American Association of Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. That professional organization where I told you that I went to, and I was like, oh, this is a thing. Yes, and I am so excited.
There's a conference for everything.
Yes, but this is a phenomenon. This is a big one, and and last year it sold out, and I was like, whoa,
awesome.
Whoa, which is awesome. But people come from all over the world because we're talking about something that affects everyone. It affects us all universally, and we need to learn about the best care and practices in the field to help us be the best educators, counselors, therapists, and doctors, and nurses, and practitioners, and rehabs, and physical therapists that you can be. And so, because we have all sorts of different intersections that bring us there. So I'm excited that I'm getting to keynote there this year. So I've been, starting to gather all the stuff for making that speech. So part of my day is like, okay, keeping track of certain speaking engagements. I'm also my next one.
And listeners to my other show, 2-Minute Talk Tips, know that one of the most important things we always tell speakers is it's all about the preparation, and 90% of your success on stage is determined before you even start speaking.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I have to have that outlined in advance. Because it's needing continuing education credits, I need to make sure that those learning objectives are met. And so, yes, I need to prep that because I want to have the research and I need to have it interesting.
Awesome.
And because when people see you, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, she can rock a speech, she can teach. All right, we want to hire her, and so that's how actually I've been building my career, because each of those engagements pushes me to. I want people to be able to engage and learn something new.
So lots of reading, lots of research, lots of school prep work, lots of school, lots of speaking.
I go to school. I have class. I'm getting. Thank goodness, City College of San Francisco has free education. So you are allowed. I'm doing the Sexuality educator, the sexual health education certificate, and so from there, and it's free because I live in the city.
Sure.
Which I love that concept of free education. I wish it was everywhere, but it has been. But that's where we have talked about I've learned so much, but all of these things about how it intersects and how disability intersects too. I took a course on ableism, but talking about how that affects people with disability in all aspects of their life about these assumptions.
Awesome. And it's one of those things I used to joke back in the day, well, when you get really busy, well, there's only 30 hours in a day as you try to cram things more. One of the things, just as a side note, one of the motivational things you see in a lot of motivational signage and whatnot is everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. What are you doing with yours? Mm-hmm. The challenge is that, you start to think about that as sort of as an ableist statement in and of itself, because yes, theoretically the clock is strict, but when you're dealing with disabilities, you have less time than somebody who doesn't. When it takes me 2 minutes to put on my shoes, now when it used to take me 10 versus somebody who takes 15 seconds, that's a little bit of time here. Get into my car, it takes more time. All these things that take more time from those of us, and you're still accomplishing all of that. That's amazing.
It's one of those, and I also like to think because, I've had to develop, I feel like as you've learned, like, especially when you've acquired that, and, that I'm like, wait, what? Having to do a lot of education on the fly and learning, like, self-advocacy about, speaking up about what access means. And so, and when I was talking about that disability and the medical and the social model, where the social model is, okay, what kind of access do you have? Like, for instance, like epilepsy, that can affect your ability to drive. If you can't drive to some places that don't have public transportation, that means your ass is stuck at home. Mm-hmm. Then how are you going to meet people or access in the community to meet partners? Or things like that. Those are things that affect your expression.
Absolutely.
Sexuality. And people, so thinking about what that means, access in terms of, we're talking about speech and things like that. How are you making yourself understood? Maybe, there are different kinds of disabilities that affect you. And so, but access is a key component of that, and that can look different than what the medical model states.
Right. So when you encounter folks in your work who are dealing with stroke or similar neuro conditions, what do you see as some of the big issues they're encountering in terms of sexuality?
Okay, one of the big things I have seen a lot has been like erectile dysfunction, and in male identified bodies. I hear a lot about the penis, but
in pretty much any male, you talk long enough, you're going to hear a lot about the penis.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, men are really concerned with that. But erectile dysfunction is one of those things, or sensation, not having the same sensation, or not, or access, being able to access or being able to masturbate due to like paralysis and things like that. So these are issues or concerns that I hear that come up. Also positioning, or being able to be supported in positioning. I hear, I can get down in the nitty gritty, but I hear about people concerned about, continence.
Right.
Incontinence and things like that. And that's all very important. And so talking about the, planning, but also, mobility, because like I said, you meet one person, and stroke is one of those things, because neurologically, it can run there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
So, what one person with a stroke is dealing with is maybe not the same thing another person is dealing with.
Exactly.
So, but typically, it's been, I've heard a lot from that, and from, female-bodied victims, not victims, I'm trying to think of survivors. I don't know, I don't even know how the hell, because I don't think of myself as a victim.
Sure.
We were talking about
generally, I know everybody uses the language differently. I think that somebody like Luke Perry, who did not survive his stroke, he's a victim.
Exactly.
If you've survived your stroke, you're a survivor.
You're a survivor. You're here. And, and you're like, okay, this happened. And that's the thing about neurological stuff, when you acquire that sort of thing. You're just, it's a different kind of reawakening as you're relearning things. But you're a survivor, most definitely.
Absolutely. And female survivors will also encounter things like, some of the same issues regarding continence issues, regarding sensation, with the added challenge of, for a lot of female survivors, they have to change their birth control strategy because
blood clots. That's it. Matter of fact, I wrote an article for Broadly. I wrote an article for Bedsider, and if you on birth control, what you need to think about birth control issues when you have a disability, and that article, discussed things like that. Like, there are certain things that you have to think about. Like, if you are, especially if you are sitting for, your disability, like if you had a stroke and you're in a chair and things like that, the birth control pill might not be for you. That has a bit higher risk of blood clots. Also, and there are just different ways that birth control, like depression, and the pill, and so just all sorts of different things you have to think about.
So there's lots of things complicated there that you're going to have to discuss, not only with your stroke physician, but most likely also with your gynecologist.
Your gynecologist.
And maybe get the two of them on a conference call so they can help figure out a solution there.
But those are things that you have to research and think about that people don't think about. I think because there's not a one size fits all when it comes to birth control, but particularly, they might have a hard time opening up medication, or some of those pill packs, how you have to pop them out and
pill management with our collection of medications is its whole separate type of thing.
Exactly.
But when you talk about that too, that then also gets into the other challenge regarding birth control, and that when you start talking about condoms and the physical dexterity required to just open one of those damn packages and then install it.
And how to involve your partner and how to have that conversation and making that all possible, and also just adjusting your thinking to coming up with newer, different ways.
Absolutely.
Of trying to connect with a person or yourself.
Right.
You're talking about, like I said, masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I find that actually that's one of the things I like to talk about, is finding ways to discover yourself, like what being able to learn your body yourself, for you, so then you can help teach somebody else, and how to work the same way you would with any other aspect of your care.
Right.
Because that's part of your care.
Absolutely. And your body has changed, your response to your body has changed, and you have to relearn all that. And you have to be able to take the time and figure that out and work with your partner if appropriate.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. A lot of folks, their intimate partner is also, in case of stroke where it's acquired suddenly, the intimate partner you have before your stroke may now also be your caregiver. And so how do you help folks navigate that relationship when you have to go from caring for a stroke survivor to now being an intimate partner with them, to keep switching those contexts back and forth from an almost sometimes parental context to a sexual context.
That's one of those, the biggest thing in that is communication. I cannot stress enough how finding a way to communicate your desire, communicate what it is that you want. But that whole aspect of navigating caregiver / intimate partner, that's going to come about through a lot of talking. And it also, especially in the case of saying you're acquiring a stroke. So, and you had this, if this is somebody that you've been in a partnership with and then it changed as a result of you having a stroke.
It's something your partner never signed up for.
Never signed up for. You got to also, think about the realities of, okay, what was my relationship like before this happened anyway? Because, you have to be real, like I said, this whole thing about communication and things like that, having to, navigating that relationship, but also that is one thing that people have heard, throughout the disability community is being able to have some services to help you do some things help you to do some things that are that doesn't make you feel as dependent on your career. But I know that's not the situation, right? But a lot of people, that just because that's the dynamic and that's how it's going to work.
There's a lot of value in that relationship, is that if the resources are available, even if that means having a part-time nurse or nurse aide come in to help with everything from toileting to bathing to a lot of these issues that can help set the context with your own partner in a different way.
Exactly, because it lets your partner know that, hey, this is my partner. This is, these needs or whatever, so it makes it feel like, and that's why I advocate for like Medicaid expansion and things like that, so we can get more home health care, so that helps people be independent and live life in the community. And part of living that life in the community, I feel, is being able to maintain or have a relationship. And, mental health wise or mentally, that's how people, are going to think about it. Like you're saying, how do you go from like caregiver and intimate partner? So, that's a bit of advice, but like I said, I know that that's not how it is for a lot of people. But let's just, if I, hypothetically say that, okay, things were, you had a healthy, established relationship, and then
if you were involved with somebody for 3 weeks before your stroke, that kind of changes the equation a little bit versus
exactly
10 years.
I'm like, don't expect them to hang out with it. But it's something like you just have to be able to be open and honest, and you have to be able to talk about it. And when I say that now with a stroke, I know that means that not everyone is going to even have the ability to, talk, due to aphasia or not being able to use those parts of the brain and able to make. But, there are apps, that allow you to communicate, desires and things like that non-verbally, and can make it, even a fun little game,
Absolutely.
to help you out. But
it's funny how a lot of the advice that applies to folks navigating this world post-stroke or with disabilities also just applies to generally healthy relationships as well.
Exactly. A lot of it, it's common. Now, I want to say common sense stuff, but, it's just like, but you just got to be able, you have to be able to talk about that, but establish that and figure out what those boundaries are and respect them.
Awesome.
Okay.
That's fantastic, Robin. Thank you so much for joining us here on Stroke-cast this week.
All right, thank you.
And that brings us to our hack of the week.
I am a big fan of being able to have Amazon Prime delivery, but Prime Now. And I know that that's not available everywhere. However, if you can get some kind of grocery delivery service, that saves you so many spoons, but also like that ability or, having, I know, yes, you can get help. You can go out in the community, you can go get help. And so, but it gives you part of your life back. That's part of the reason why I can do all the stuff that I want to do work-wise is because I use hacks like that. And for me, that's like the simplest.
Robin and I could have gone on for several more hours. It's really great that folks like Robin are out there talking about these issues and helping folks with disabilities live every aspect of their lives to the fullest. I talked about sex after stroke back in episode 52 at strokecast.com/sex, and I expect to be revisiting the issue again in the future. It's an important issue for many folks, and it simply isn't talked about much by our medical teams. On an unrelated note, or maybe related, April is Occupational Therapy Month. If you're in OT and you like your therapists, be sure to tell them that you appreciate the work that they do this month. If you're no longer in OT, consider sending them a message or a note telling them where you are today. OTs, especially from early in our recoveries, don't often hear back from former patients and are delighted to get updates. So reach out to your OTs and say thanks. Are there any specific questions about sex and sexuality after stroke that you would like me to address in future episodes? Let me know in the comments over at strokecast.com/Robin or just email me at bill@strokecast.com. Learn more about Robin's work and the organizations she mentioned by visiting the links at strokecast.com/Robin. Be sure to subscribe to Strokecast in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.